You worked your whole life for this moment. You hit the number, the promotion, the house, the title on the business card. Everything you said you wanted, you got it. And then you sit down one night, the house is quiet, and this thought hits you out of nowhere. Is this it? If that's ever crossed your mind, even for a second, this episode's for you. Because I've been there. And what I figured out after years of chasing the wrong thing is the reason I started this podcast. This is Decoding Wealth, the podcast for people who are done pretending that money alone is the finish line. I'm your host, D. Echols, Navy veteran, operations manager running 4 regions of one of the largest trucking companies in North America, founder of a real estate company in Maine, founder of a marketing coaching company, and creator of the show you're listening to right now. And if you're a working professional, a blue-collar wealth builder, a trucker, somebody building something real on the side of a demanding career, you're who I'll call my peeps. This show is for you. Every week, we break down one of what I call the 5 pillars of real wealth: financial, relationship, emotional, spiritual, and health. I call it the fresh method. And over the next few months, we're going to walk through every single one of them together. But today, episode 1, I owe you something first. I owe you my story. Because you shouldn't trust anybody's method without knowing why they built it in the first place. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and if you've ever lived in Chicago, you know the city is 2 stories at the same time. One of the most beautiful cities in America and one of the hardest places to grow up if the wrong block is yours. Violence is normal, not because we want it to be, because we didn't have a choice about where it showed up. You learned at a young age to read the room. You learned which streets to cross and which to walk around. What kept me alive, literally kept me alive, was my mother. I was raised by a single mother who was fierce. Not fierce in the hashtag way, fierce in the you're not going to become a statistic, not on my watch way. She worked 3 to 11 at a plant on the north side, came home every night around midnight or so, sometimes later. When my mother was at work earning the paycheck to keep us fed, I was around 11 years old or so. My 2 little sisters, they were my responsibility. I made sure they got home from school. I made sure they ate. I helped them with their homework. Made sure the house was clean. Then I made sure they got to bed. Most nights, I lay down in my bed waiting to hear the keys in the door before I let myself fall asleep. That's where I learned what responsibility actually feels like. Long before any title, long before any uniform, long before any business card. And I want to be clear about something here. Responsibility at 11 doesn't feel heroic. It feels normal. It only feels heroic when somebody else describes it back to you. At the time, it was just another day. It was just what I did when my mother was the only line between the family and falling apart. She was the breadwinner. She kept clothes on our back. I had family around me too, don't get me wrong. I had aunties, uncles, cousins, my grandparents on Sunday or on the weekends. They took me to church. That's where I started forming whatever I have in terms of faith. More spiritual than religious. But it started there, in a wooden pew, with my grandmother's elbow next to mine. The point I want you to hear, community is wealth. That's a seed that got planted in me long before I had a language for it. I learned early that the people around me aren't side dishes to you. They are your life. When everything else falls apart and the people who show up are the people who matter, the lessons got into my bone at that young age. And it's still there. I'm going to be very honest with you. I wasn't perfect growing up. I made some wrong turns. But here's where my mother showed up in my story again. I want peeps who are parents, grandparents, aunties, uncles, anybody with a young person in their life, I want you to hear this carefully. When I was finishing high school, my mother sat me down and she laid out some options, three of them. You're going to college, you're going to get a job, or you're joining the military. That was the menu. And she was adamant about it. I want to be very specific about what I mean by that word. She didn't suggest, she didn't propose, she didn't ask me what I thought I wanted to do. She said, you're going to do one of these three things. We are not having a different conversation. And she didn't back down. Now, it wasn't because she was controlling. It was because she wanted more from me than the block we were living on. More than that block was going to give. She had watched too many young men on the south side of Chicago drift right into a life she'd worked the 3 to 11 shift to keep me out of. She wasn't going to let her son be next. There was just so many things going on, and she was going to take a stand. Here's the distinction I want people to take from this, because I didn't see it for many years. My mom chose for me only in this sense. She chose the menu. She did not choose the dish. The pick was mine, deal. College, job, military. I had to make it. That's the only difference between parenting trying to control you and parenting trying to save you. I know which one she was now. I didn't always know it then. So with three options on the table and my mother, who wasn't going to let me weasel around them, I made my pick. I walked to the Air Force recruiter's office first, across from a guy who looked at me and said something like, yeah, we can ship you in about a year or so. A year? And I'll never forget what went through my mind when he said that. I didn't say it out loud, but inside I was screaming, I don't have a year, man. I don't have 6 months. I don't have 90 days. Every day I stayed in my neighborhood was another day something could go wrong. A wrong place, a wrong friend, a wrong decision. I couldn't take that back. I had watched it happen to too many people that I knew. I wasn't going to be there. So I said respectfully, I don't have a year. Thanked him, stood up, walked down to the Navy recruiter. The Navy recruiter said, we can ship you soon after you graduate from high school, no problem. That was the answer I needed. In 1990, I was sworn in on the pitcher's mound of Comiskey Park, right there on a baseball field in the city that had raised me. I raised my right hand and signed up for something bigger than my zip code. And here's a fun fact for you, right? In 1990 was the last year at the old Comiskey Park. The last year White Sox were there. The new park opened next door in 1991, and the old one came down right after. So when I raised my right hand on that mound, I was standing on a piece of baseball history that was about to disappear. A Southside kid on the last summer of the Southside ballpark that carried many great memories. I want you to feel that for a second. The pitcher's mound, the last summer of a place, in the city where I'd grown up dodging things I shouldn't have to been dodging at 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. Standing there in front of the flag and an officer and the city behind me, and I was about to leave the city. That's the moment. That's the pivot. The Navy changed my life. Full stop. Not because of the uniform, not because of the paycheck, because for the first time, I saw how big the world actually was. The Navy put me on a ship, and the ship goes places, right? I saw cities I've only seen on TV. I met people who've grown up nothing like me. Different colors, different countries, different beliefs about how a man's supposed to live. People who didn't know my block existed. People whose biggest concern at 15 wasn't whether they were going to make it to 21. And here's what that does to a young man's brain. It tells you the world is bigger than the room you were born in. And if the world is bigger than the room, you can become bigger than the room too. That's an ideal I didn't have before. I needed somebody to put me into a different room before I could see it. I learned discipline in the Navy, not the bumper sticker kind, the real kind, the kind where you get out of your bunk at 4 a.m., not because you want to, but because you said you would. the person in the bunk next to you who is counting on you. I learned how to lead people from people who'd earned the right to lead, not people who talked their way into a title. I learned how to follow when my ego wanted to argue, and there were many times of that. And I want you to hear me on this one, because that's the lesson that made me good at running Fleet Slate. You cannot lead people if you never learn to follow well. Most importantly, the Navy, I learned that you can be from where I'm from and still walk into a room in the world. Neighborhood didn't have to be my ceiling. It was my starting point. So I came out of the Navy a different man than the one that walked into the recruiter's office. And I took that version of me into the next chapter. Now, I want to be honest with you about something before I get to the trucking chapter. There were many years between the day I left the Navy and the day I started at the truck company I work for now. Several years. I'm not going to fill all that in now in this episode, but I want you to know they happen. Because my peeps know there's always a chapter between the chapters. There's always a stretch where you're just trying things, figuring things out, becoming the person who's ready for what's next. Several years later, yours might be 5, yours might be 20. That gap is part of your story. So let's go back to the truck. In November of 2011, I walked into the trucking company that I work for today. I came in as a regional driver, steering wheel, logbook, long highways, coffee that was older than my kids. I've done it. Let me give you a scene from those early days, because my peeps, any industry will recognize this one. It's 3 a.m. in the morning. I'm pulling into a truck stop somewhere in Pennsylvania. Luckily, I found a place to park because that's difficult. I've been driving since 6 the night before. My back hurts. My eyes are tired. I just want to sleep. I'm sitting in the cab in the dark, and I'm thinking, is this the job? Is this what I'm going to be doing for the next 30 years? Because the truth is, every job has a 3 a.m. moment. Yours might be a hospital shift, a delivery shift, a Zoom meeting that ran 4 hours over. The 3 a.m. moment is when the work tests. And the answer you give in that moment, that's the moment you find out who you are. Over the next years, I did quite a few jobs at that company. Of course, I was a regional driver, local driver, worked in the warehouse as a loader, became the warehouse manager, went into planning, was a dispatcher. Many days I did 2 jobs at the same time. Then 2015 is when I started my recruiting career at this company. And listen, I want you to hear what's actually happening in those years. I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this because time people see the title that ends up on the business card usually has years of 2 jobs at once underneath it, of someone willing to do both because they trust the client, of someone who isn't waiting for permission to step into the next role. My job in recruiting was to find drivers, convince them to come work for us. And I'll tell you what, the same skills that got me through the Navy and through Chicago are the same skills that made me good at recruiting. You listen, you build trust, and above all else, you tell the truth. In 2016, I built a campaign called Call D Directly, television, radio across Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts. Drivers could literally pick up the phone and call me, not a 1-800 number, me. That campaign is where the brand I'd eventually build my marketing coaching company around was born, long before I had a logo for it. In 2021, I got promoted to recruiting manager. That same year, my wife at the time and I started a real estate company. The goal was simple: buy and rent real estate in Maine, just Maine. We weren't trying to be a national operation. We wanted a footprint we can touch in a place we love. And I want to tell you something my wife at the time did when we started the company that I'll never forget. She gave me a journal, leather bound, beautiful, with the company name embossed on the front. That was her way of saying, this is real. We're built. That journal sat on my desk for every day from then on. I still have that journal. Some gifts are gifts. That one was a vote of confidence I needed more than I knew at the time. In June of 2023, I got promoted again, terminal manager, something that I said I was going to be. Packed up, transferred to South Carolina, took over the South region with 100 drivers under me. Same year, I formed a marketing coaching company a little bit earlier and started consulting with small business because my peeps kept asking me, how was I building all this on the side? And I figured I better start writing it down and helping other people. 15 years, one company, 7 different roles. I've done every job in this company, almost. And don't get me wrong, because I'm probably going to grow more, and I'm proud of that climb. I earned everything. But somewhere along the way, I had that moment I described at the top of the show. The quiet house, the number hit, and the thought, that's it. I want to tell you the truth about how this actually happened, because if I told you the South Carolina paycheck was the moment everything changed, I'd be lying to you. And I don't lie to my people. Tell you the truth, give it to you how it is, you take it how it goes. The South Carolina paycheck was the first wake up. 48 hours after that direct deposit hit, sitting in my new office, I felt nothing. I knew something was wrong. I knew the money wasn't the answer I'd been treating it. But here's what I did next. And this is the part most people don't tell you on their origin story. I didn't change my money habits. Not really. I just changed what I spent it on. For about 18 months or so, from the back half of 2023 to the first half of 2025, I tried to fill the emptiness by spending money differently. I was generous. I was helping people, family members going through tough stretches, friends needing a hand. I took trips. I experienced things. I was telling myself the whole time, see, I'm using money for what matters now. I'm not chasing the number anymore. I'm using it for life. And it felt good at the moment, every time, until early 2025. Now, I want to say something here that's true about me and probably true about a lot of my peeps. I've always worked hard. That's not a flex. That's a confession. From 11 years old, taking care of my sisters, to the Navy, for many years of figuring it out between the military and trucking, climbing 7 roles at one company in 15 years, about, to launching a real estate company while I was running a W-2. I've always worked hard because working hard was the only thing I really knew how to do. So when life got harder, I worked harder. When the South Carolina paycheck didn't fill me up, I worked hard at being generous, at experiencing things, at using money for meaning. I just couldn't see that I was working hard at the wrong thing. Early 2025 is when I sat down with my numbers and realized something that hit harder than the South Carolina moment ever did. With the biggest paycheck I'd ever made in my life from a W-2 job, I was spending more than I was bringing in. Let me say that again, because this is the most important sentence in this episode. The biggest paycheck I ever made, and I was upside down at the end of every month. Not because I was buying yachts, because I was using money generously, lovingly, and with good intention. I just got done looking at the number, and I had this question rolling in my head that I hadn't let myself ask before. If I have the biggest paycheck of my life in a W-2 job, and I'm still struggling, what game am I actually playing? That's the moment everything changed. Here's what I realized that night. I've been chasing one kind of wealth, financial, while 4 other parts of my life quietly running on it. And when that paycheck didn't fill me up, I tried to redirect the money instead of asking a real question. My relationships needed more time. I had people in my life who had been patiently waiting for me to come back from work for years. And they stopped asking, how long would it take? My emotional tank was lower than I wanted to admit. I had been white-knuckling stress for so long, I thought stress was, let's be honest, the baseline. My spiritual life, the thing that my grandparents planted in me on Sundays, I let it go quiet. My health had been on the back burner for too long. I was carrying weight I didn't want and getting 4.5 hours sleep most nights. I had been told, like most people have been told, that if you just fix the money, everything else will fall into place. And I'm telling you from the other side of that, it's a lie. It doesn't. Fixing the money is one of the 5 things you need to fix. Money is the loudest one, of course. It's not the most important one, by far. And throwing more of it at people, at trips, at experiences, that's not fixing it. That's just spending in a different direction. Early 2025 is when I actually started building something different. I started taking what I lived through, Chicago, the date, the climb, the paycheck that didn't fix me, the 18 months of trying to spend my way into meeting. I started organizing that into something I can use. I gave it a name, the Fresh Method. That's the year I created Decoding, the brand, the podcast you're listening to right now, early 2025, because my biggest joy in life has always been to help people, encouraging people, building people up. And once I had something that actually worked for me, I had to build it for you too. That's why this show exists. Not because I figured it out at the top of the mountain, because I figured it out after climbing the mountain several times and realized I've been climbing the wrong one. Before we close out this first episode, I want to hand you something you can take with you, something you can start using today, even if you've never listened to another podcast. I call it the Fresh Method. 5 pillars, every one of them matters, and if any one of them is broken, other 4 can't hold up for long. F is financial. Growing your finances, earning, saving, investing, giving, living a legacy. R, relationship. Growing the relationships in your life. The people in your corner are not a distraction from their wealth. They are your wealth. I learned that at 11 years old in Chicago with 2 little sisters in an empty apartment, and I'll never forget it. E, emotional. Understanding your emotional well-being, because a man or woman who cannot regulate their inner world will never rule their outer one. I've watched leaders with 7-figure incomes get unmade by an emotional pattern that they never bothered to look at. S, spiritual. Embracing your spirituality through faith, through religion, through your sense of purpose in the universe. My grandmother in a wooden pew on Sundays planted this in me at a young age. I let it go quiet for 20 years or so. Coming back to it changed my life. H, health. Building healthy habits, eating, moving, resting. If your body gives out, nothing else on this list matters. I'm not going to tell you what to eat or how to work out. I'm going to tell you why your body is the foundation under everything else you're building. Financial wealth buys you options. Fresh wealth buys you a life worth living. Here's your homework after this episode, and I'm serious about this. Take the 5 letters, FRESH, grab a piece of paper, or pull out your phone, open up the Notes app, whatever, and next to each letter, give yourself a score from 1 to 10 on where you actually are right now. Not where you want to be, not where you tell people you are, where you actually are. Be brutal with yourself. The number that scares you to write down is the one closest to the truth. That's your starting point. That's your baseline. And in the weeks ahead of this show, we're going to work on every single one of those numbers together. One more thing on this. The lowest number on your list, circle it. That's the pillar you're starting from in the next 4 episodes. Don't fix the one you already feel okay with. Fix the ones that are quietly draining the other 4. 3 quick things. 1, head over to decodingwealth.net. DECODINGWEALTH.net. That's your home base. You got a free ebook there walking you through the Fresh Method. with real examples and real exercise. The DCW app is there also. That's my Decoding Wealth app. 5 AI coaches, one for every fresh pillar, plus a learning library that gets fresh content 4 times a week. Built it for my people who want this in their pocket every single day. Everything you need lives at decodingwealth.net. 2, follow this show. Wherever you're listening, Apple, Spotify, whatever your app is, hit the follow button. That's how you tell the algorithm this kind of conversation deserves to reach more people. 3, if you know somebody who's grinding hard and feeling empty, a friend, a coworker, somebody at church, send them this episode. Might be the conversation that changes their week. I'm Dia. This has been Decoding Wealth, Episode 1. Next week, we're opening up the financial pillar, not the surface stuff. We're going to talk about what money is actually for and why most peeps are playing the wrong game with it. Until then, take care of all 5, not just the one that pays.